Hey, what's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome back to the Salute to Troy podcast. Got a very special guest for you today. Unfortunately, we're missing our triage, our bearded bandit, Alfred. He'll be back next episode, but joined as always by the madman, Jamal Madney. And beneath us, long time coming. It's been almost a year now that we've been not just friends, but kind of working together. But finally, we're able to get the great Jeff McKay, co-founder of Conquest Collective, on the show to talk things NIL and all things SC. So, Jeff, we appreciate the time. How you doing, my man?
Doing great, guys. I appreciate you having me on the show. And I got to say, it's the first time anybody's ever said great in my name in the same sentence. So I really appreciate it.
Well, it's deserved. Have you been on a podcast circuit? Is this your first one you're guesting on?
You know, honestly, I think I've done a couple of them a while back, but it was around the Notre Dame game, something to do with that. So
unfortunate timing.
It's the first time on your guys' show, but I know I've done a couple other ones, but it was more Notre Dame week themed.
Yeah, well, leading up to that was fun. Afterwards was a bummer.
Oh, I was so confident going into that game.
Yeah,
we all flew out there. I was feeling really good, and then things went south pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, I remember we were all out there. Me and you, I don't think I ended up linking up, but Murr was out there. I got down on the sidelines and like Keyshawn and Lionel, and everyone was all hyped up. And then like by halftime, everyone was like, yeah, we're out of here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, but thanks for coming. But Madman, how you doing, man? What's going on, brother?
Doing well. Great to see you guys. And, always excited to talk ball.
Yeah. So, well, Jeff, we'll jump into it. I mean, for those that don't know, this world of NIL, it's a vast changing world. Obviously there's been legal stuff going on in courts, which we won't really get much into that, but you co-founded Conquest as another entity to kind of help facilitate NIL deals, take care of these student athletes and really help with branding and different stuff. But for those that don't know, maybe just give a little brief overview of what Conquest is, kind of what your guys' goals are. Obviously there's other collectives with USC, but kind of just what you guys stand for and what you hope to achieve.
Yeah, of course. So Conquest been around for, I think it's been about a year and a half. So our focus, to date has really been on branding deals. So finding various student athletes, presenting them with as many, marketing opportunities as possible. So we're describe it as, basically an agency for USC student athletes, non-exclusive deals. So we encourage them, if they want to sign with us, to work with whoever else they want, any deals that come through. They certainly don't need to run them through us. So we're kind of just offering our assistance and giving them guidance, whenever needed. So that's been historically. And then, things I think have maybe changed a bit in the past, say, 2 months. As you alluded to, there's been a lot of legislation changes, pretty significant ones of what NIL groups are allowed to do now, such as interact with, high school recruits, which before you 100% were not allowed to do that. So couldn't really have any impact there if you're not allowed to talk to anybody. It was, really after the fact, once they signed, then you could talk with them. But the recruiting process, you were not allowed to do that. So that's probably the biggest change, is now we, are allowed to talk with those players, that are interested, kind of give them some background, some ideas of, the types of things that we might be able to help them with, and really kind of get into the actual particulars and some cases, dollar amounts of what that might look like. So that's a pretty substantial change. And then, also, as you said, like the landscape is just constantly changing. So the other fairly big news that came out last week is this rev share model that got approved via this, antitrust lawsuit that came through. So I think that's going to have a pretty substantial impact on how things unfold in 2025 or 2026, whatever, or full year away from that. But when it does come through the pipe, I think that'll have a good impact. And at least in my opinion, will have a very positive impact for USC, because I think they're one of the schools that can probably capitalize on what would be allowed in that rev share model.
Jeff, some really fascinating stuff. And to your point, lots of changes here. What is your view of Conquest and how you see it kind of relating to the athletic department moving forward in terms of rev share, and where does kind of Conquest play that role? And then obviously House of Victory is another collective that there's a lot of notoriety and publicity around it. And how do you see you playing with House of Victory, and how you see yourself playing with the athletic department?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it. So our group, third party, we're not directly associated with USC, not to speak for House of Victory, but I think they would give the same answer. So it's important to note that it is a third party. By rule, we can't be directly associated. So good relationship. They've always been super supportive. So we're in contact, but we do operate completely separately. House of Victory's done great job. So they're the primary donor collective. So they're out there, as you see, doing various campaigns to raise money from, donors, fans, all that kind of stuff. So our focus is not necessarily on the donor side. We're certainly not out there promoting it, trying to get, the average fan to kick in some money, even though that is obviously very important. But to avoid any confusion, House of Victory is already kind of really doing a good job on that front. So we're staying out of that lane, and that's really never been our focus. We are now, with some rules changes, maybe interacting with potential donors who have companies and trying to potentially do some partnerships that we think will be really cool once we get them to the finish line. That'll be really impactful. But, again, we're not out there advertising, trying to raise donor money.
Yeah, I know, Jeff, we've talked a lot. Like, that's the fun kind of part of, partnerships and branding deals. Like, obviously the alumni base of USC, I mean, Jamal is one of them. And obviously you're one of them, and just the alumni base of companies just in LA that are here, that have kind of that branding recognition, that can do deals and partnerships with these players. And we've talked about as a network about how we kind of align with that synergy. So a lot of exciting stuff. I think there's a lot of opportunity there on both ends, and also in, teaching and stuff like that, and getting a lot of these student athletes ready for, life after football. If ones don't make it on, into the NFL, or even just after the NFL, like if they've had this branding experience throughout the collegiate experience, that's the part of college, right? Like, you're learning in the classroom, but if you can learn through NIL and make it a positive, there's so much negative press about it, but make it a positive, which I think is what you guys are really trying to do. So this question now is going to sound weird with me pumping it all up like that, but what have you struggled with the most in this NIL space? I'm sure there's tons of, we've talked before, there's tons of like paperwork in the beginning you've had to gone through, and just what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And you don't have to get super granular, specific, but just what have you kind of realized is the real biggest challenge in the year and a half that Conquest has been around?
Yes. I think the challenge at first was understanding exactly what the rules entail, from the NCAA side. So that took some learning. Then they kind of continue to change. I wouldn't say drastically, but the rules do continue to change. That part is a little bit challenging. And then, I would say just educating people, businesses, what NIL is. There is definitely a lot of confusion out there, and a lot of kind of negative press out there about things that are happening, elsewhere in the country. So I think just getting people comfortable with how it actually works. And then also that it's not like, it doesn't seem to just be a fad that's going to go away. I think that has been honestly an issue with a lot of people. They're like, well, this is nonsense. There's no way it'll last. And I think it's becoming pretty apparent that it's not going to go back to the way it was, regardless of how people feel about it, whether that's right or wrong. And I totally understand the argument for both sides. It is what it is. And to be, competitive and truly elite, and to compete for national championships, that kind of thing, you do need to have a really strong NIL program. So that is really our focus, is to try to, honestly, at the end of the day, give the players what they deserve, but also the coaching staff the resources they need to sign, some of these top level recruits. So that is really, I would say, our biggest focus now going into this next season and this next calendar year, is our group at least is really trying to focus on some of the, I would say, high profile guys, the 5-star kids, to try to assist the other groups in trying to bring some of those guys to the finish line. And our business models, slightly different. So I think we willingly chose to do a for-profit model. And the reason we do that is like people are like, oh, you're just trying to make money. And honestly, like laugh at anyone who says that, because honestly, like people in our group, we have other jobs. This is not our full-time job, but we do spend a lot of time doing this, and can confidently say, like, from an investment standpoint, starting an NIL group it's not a particularly profitable business. Like there's far better areas to get involved in. So that's definitely not why we're doing it. But the for-profit model, I personally believe it is a better way to go, because it gives you way more flexibility on the types of deals you can structure with potential players. So how they're, meeting less appearances for more money up front, more like kind of like an NFL contract, to be honest. So I think that is appealing to, like I said, those high profile guys. That seems to be the way a lot of other schools are doing it, that are doing a really good job, at least on the NIL front. So that's the way we chose to do it. And also, to try to ultimately create some reoccurring revenue. So our goal, for-profit, is not honestly to put any of it in our pocket. None of us have made a dime off of this. Anything that we make off of it goes back into the pot, or, the quote war chest, whatever you want to call it. So some additional revenue that way. But more than anything, like I said, I think it's really beneficial to be able to have some flexibility in how you structure contracts for some of these really truly elite guys who have plenty of other schools offering them a ton of cash. So being able to be competitive in that front, but also structure it in a way where it's not them having to do 50 different appearances, to get paid in smaller increments. That, in my opinion, is not what some of these kids really are after, and not what other schools are doing. So
Makes sense, Jeff. And speaking of kind of the 5-star blue chip athletes and seeing kind of what else is out there, just from your vantage point, your level of expertise, Jeff, who are some teams out there that you think are really kind of the leaders in this space, either through finances or thought leadership or different models? And then a corollary to that, how are you seeing USC kind of stack up competitively from an NIL perspective? What are you liking with what you're seeing? Where do you think there can be some improvements? A lot of conversation on kind of where SC's stacking up.
Yeah, it's another good question. So I would say, on the NIL front, the obvious answers are Oregon does a really good job. You hear all the time that they're making very aggressive offers at players. So it's frustrating, but, they're playing within the rules. So you got to give them credit. They are doing a good job. They have some really smart people working on that group, a lot of former Nike executives, those types of people. And then obviously it would appear that a lot of that funding is coming directly from one booster, who I think who I'm alluding to. So that's a huge benefit. So they have a lot of cash, but they're also structuring deals in a pretty smart way. So they're doing a really good job. Ohio State, has two different groups, but they work pretty well together. They're raising a lot of cash. They also have one nonprofit, then one for-profit. So they seemingly work fairly well together. So they're another one that, of late, they've been doing really well on the NIL front. Tennessee's group does really well. Ole Miss, a lot of the SEC schools seem to have really figured this out pretty quickly. So, yeah. And then the answer to the last part of your question, how does SC stack up? I mean, I think it's continued to improve. I think maybe we got off to a fairly slow start and had some catching up to do. But give credit to House of Victory. They've raised, I don't know what the figure is, but a large amount of money also for going across all sports. So they're not just focused on football. So they're doing a lot of really cool stuff across the board for all sports. So I think, as a whole, totally, in my opinion, it's, like top 10, top 15. And I think to get to where those other ones that I just mentioned, there's definitely some work that still needs to be done. And then, it'll be interesting to see how this new rev share impacts things. I think it'll help SC a lot because, essentially it's rev share up to, I believe, $21 or $22 million, but Title IX, it's got to be split across. But I think football will get a good chunk of that. So say the math worked out to $10 million, then it kind of depends, like, does each player get an equal share? All that stuff still needs to be figured out. But at the end of the day, that is more cash that will go towards players, and it can go directly from SC. So that's a win. And I think SC's probably one of a handful of schools that fiscally can even make that happen. I think a lot of the mid-major schools, there's no way they're going to be able to do that. So I think that's good. I guess the counter argument is those other schools, Oregon, Ohio State, probably fall into that bucket. So I think it'll help, but in my opinion, the collectives aren't going to go away. I think what's going to happen is they're going to do that rev share, and then the collectives will be an added bonus. So you still got to figure out how to really, compete with some of those other offers.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this. What, Jamil, was it last week on our show about how if it was right before it passed, we were saying like, if/when it does pass, what does that mean? And we agreed. It's like, I don't think NIL is going anywhere. It's just it's basically now you're adding incentives onto what is already like a base fee or whatever in rev share. Okay. So I didn't read too much on this, Jeff. So, and I don't even know if you heard this or saw this, but I'm just kind of curious. I read last week or a couple days ago, even University of Minnesota hired someone whose sole focus is basically reaching out to Fortune 500 companies about either donating or partnering into their NIL collectives and their fund. And I know they have like a very specific what PJ Fleck runs and whatnot. I don't know all the details, but you kind of alluded to it a little bit at the top, saying how, you see Conquest as more of a facilitator for branding and this deal. So is that kind of, when you see Minnesota doing that, do you see that as like your value prop kind of as Conquest? Like, hey, USC has all these great alumni. I mean, we've been seeing the coaches start tweeting stuff out about like SC and they're all their founders and CEOs all across, not just LA, but across the globe. Is that something you and Conquest can kind of facilitate and kind of take the lead on that for SC?
Yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, so to be honest, I didn't see the Minnesota thing, but there's other schools that have similar people that they brought in-house. So that is something, we can certainly try to do and have been trying to do. It sometimes gets a little complicated with the rights for marks and logos. It's not necessarily through USC, it's through the media rights holder. So it's not always a super seamless process of getting approval to use the marks and logos. So we can do that and help facilitate marketing deals for anybody, as long as they're not necessarily always wearing like the USC gear. That part's super easy. But a lot of those companies, if they do want to do that, they can kind of slow the process, or there's a fairly substantial fee that they have to pay. So I think what you're describing, at some point, especially if this rev share thing goes through, USC bringing some of this in-house would make a lot of sense, because then you could kind of get around that issue, if it makes sense. But yeah, I mean, Minnesota, there's a bunch of schools doing that, where they've brought in people that kind of do that for them. And then, I think at other schools also, that's kind of what the collectives are trying to do. Even though, I think a lot of the SEC schools are just raising cash. I don't think they're really even attempting to do marketing deals, but I could be wrong. But no, it's a good question. It's something I think that'll continue to evolve. I don't want to say that should be us. I think there's plenty of capable people that can reach out to those companies. And like you said, there's plenty of SC, CEOs out there that want to help. And, it's kind of just coming down to educating them, showing them, how it works. I think the more data we can get, the better, like to really show what the ROI truly is, which, on a marketing deal is actually, depending on who it is, really good. Like, you get a lot of these younger people have huge social media followings. Like you can show an actual ROI, which honestly, a year and a half ago, I don't think there was any real data that actually supported it was good for companies. But the longer this goes, I think it's starting to show that to some of these big companies that there really is something there. So, I think it'll continue to evolve.
Jeff, just segueing, and we'll probably get you out on this. Obviously, brave new world out there, to your point, with everything that you've described. And tradition seems to be kind of taking a little bit of a backseat to this new world. Interesting conversation today from Colin Cowherd talking about the USC Notre Dame rivalry. And
I didn't hear exactly what he said. I saw it pop up on Twitter. He was basically alluding to like tradition's gone. We shouldn't do it.
Yeah, he basically saying, look, I mean, tradition's gone, but SC's schedule is going to be so hard now year over year in the Big Ten. They could use a reprieve in the non-conference, and unless Notre Dame wants to come and join the Big Ten, they should probably table the rivalry. What is your thoughts on that? Obviously, being kind of Mr. USC, your lineage, and everything. Thoughts on Mr. Cowherd?
I mean, I highly doubt he's going to hear it for listening to this because I actually am a big fan. But I would, I get where he's coming from. I would, obviously disagree on Notre Dame. I think it's a pretty important part of the history and one of those rivalries you got to keep going. So, is the schedule getting just really tough? Yes. So hopefully, like when they go to the playoff system, giving teams that play a schedule like this, that even lose 2 games, a shot to get in, I think it's obviously the right way to do it. So Notre Dame, I would keep. I mean, with the Pac-12 splitting, you're going to lose some of those, traditions, which Stanford, Cal, which sucks. Like we love playing them, but that doesn't, at least to me, sting as much as Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame, UCLA, you got to keep it going.
Got to keep it. Yep.
Yeah.
But I get where he's coming from because it is, I don't know. Some people don't care about history, and I get where they're coming from. Like, in certain, again, rivalries don't hold nearly as much weight, but I think that is SC Notre Dame is one of the few that really does hold the weight, and they should keep doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it was my first time out in South Bend this last year and just seeing
right.
It's very real and the hatred.
Sure.
And, yeah.
The hatred's there and we hate them too. But I mean, aside from that, it's just a cool rivalry. Like that game day feeling is, it's hard to explain, but I haven't seen many that can really rival it. And the setup at Notre Dame, it's as good as it gets. So,
and so many rivalries are regional, right? And rightfully so. That's like one of the few non-regional rivalries that stood the test of time.
Yeah, literally, I don't even know what other one you could argue comes close.
Like
to your point, all the others are regional, local rivalries. So,
it's the only one that's intersectional. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't think it's going anywhere. I mean, there's too much money in it too, right? Like it's not going anywhere. Like let's be real.
Yeah. I mean, ratings Notre Dame crushes it with their TV deal. So I don't think anyone's going to get rid of that game.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I'll get one more. Jamil, did you have any more? Or
no, I'm good.
Just because we haven't talked to you. I mean, I've talked to you obviously offline, but it's the off season now. And so I just want to get your thoughts on the state of the program overall, football wise, and not just NIL wise, but the coaching turnaround. We see, the spring game, we saw the defense that was flying all over the place. Offense, I think shows some bright spots. There were some hiccups in the spring game, but I think you can see like a high ceiling there. So just what's your thoughts on the program compared to where it was basically this time last year?
I think in my opinion, it's going in the right direction. I mean, I think some of the new coaching hires, especially on the defensive side of the ball, are really exciting. And safe to say, SC fans were very, very happy to hear these hires. And then, bringing in Henny, who's just like a total rock star, I think gives us a lot of hope that, we're not going to be in a position where we're having to put up 40 or 50 points a game, to win in the future. So I think in that regard, it's going great. it's hard to, I don't know. Next year, our schedule is absolutely brutal. So there's probably some question marks there. So I don't know, what next season is going to look like, but I think the future looks really, really bright. That 2025 recruiting class, I think has the chance to be something truly special and something, that will catapult us for years to come. So I'm really excited about that, with some of the big names, especially that quarterback, some of the defensive studs. I really think if we can hone down and get that recruiting class to the finish line, that's going to set us up really nicely for the future. And then with all these coaches, Lincoln Riley with a defense it could be pretty scary. So I'm really excited about that part. And then this season, optimistic. I don't know. You guys are far more experts than I am, but I think this team's going to be good. I'm just not sure it's playoff ready necessarily, but
yeah. I think what we've talked about at worst, they'll at least be competent on defense, which is a refreshing thing to see.
Yeah, exactly.
they'll get a couple stops at least, and
they'll get some stops. They'll be well coached in the right position, and then with next year's recruiting class, and then who knows what happens in the portal, like getting those guys some more kind of key pieces on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to be stacked, and again, honestly, Henny is just crushing it. So it's pretty exciting to see what he might be able to do for us, in the next few years.
Yeah. He's the real deal. So it was, we cover all the teams. It's a bummer to see him leave the Rams, and then you see him land at SC, and you're like, oh, great. Okay, this is great. And he hit the ground running, and it's been fun to watch and fun to hear your guys' relationship and whatnot. So
zero-sum game for LAFB. That worked out nicely. Yeah. And Jeff, I think we're going to quote you on the theme for 24, refreshingly competent. That's going to be the slogan,
Right? That's pretty catchy.
Yeah, there we go. I don't know. Maybe a shirt. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we got an S there. Like we got a C there. There's some things that can work. There's some things that can work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess some people could be like, it is sort of insulting to some, but I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. We'll throw unified in there so you get the U as well. Then it sounds more positive. Yeah. But Jeff McKay, co-founder of Conquest Collective. My brother, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all the insight, and can't wait to keep chatting throughout the season.
Love it. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks so much, Jeff.